Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to episode 75 of What a Piece of Junk, the Star Wars podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. That's right, it is our diamond anniversary, and to celebrate, and also because he's the guy in charge of everything, joining me is Kyle Wagner. Hey, Kyle, how's it going?
It's going good. I mean, I'm so honored that you're having me on this podcast discussing Boba Fett PBS Tribal Dancer. I'm quite excited
Yeah,
about that. It's good to know
totally.
it's good to know those Republic credits I give you are spent well.
They are very much spent well. The salary is much appreciated, and I'll let you take it up with Tim Morrison himself about whether or not that was dancing or a imposing warrior haka. But
Well,
just let the
if he
record
comes at
show
yeah,
it was
if
not
he
me
comes
who
at me
said
with a
that.
gaffy stick, I'm running the other way. I'm just saying.
That's a good plan. And you know who else would probably run the other way? My co-host Derrick Marsh. Derrick, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. And Happy New Year, gentlemen.
Happy New Year to you, sir.
Yes.
How
Yeah.
how are things for you?
It's been good. Just bearing myself out of Snowmageddon here in Lexington, Kentucky. We got quite a bit of snow. I'm not, going to complain too much. I mean, it was about like 6 to 7 inches, which in Cleveland or Chicago, where we're from, isn't a whole lot. I mean, that was a typical Tuesday. But down here in the South, anything over an inch, it shuts down everything. But they did actually have quite a bit come in, all in the record snowfall. It was about 2 inches per hour. So
Oh,
from about 10 a.m. till about 6, 7 p.m. on Thursday, it was pretty quickly. And we got Sophia home. She got to play outside in the snow. And then we watched Star Wars multiple times.
oh, that's so great that you got to watch the movie with her for the first time. We should ask you about that later in the show because I know our next co-host will want to ask you some questions. It's my original Wookiee co-pilot, Mr. Nathan Miracle. Nathan, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, but I would not be happy with all that snow because it's cold.
It is very cold, but
Gets in the
for
fur.
that's right. But for tonight's episode of What a Piece of Junk, it's not so much cold as it is cool. And we want to move right ahead with some cool commentary and reactions to the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 2, The Tribes of Tatooine. I don't know about you guys, but I loved this episode and cannot wait to get discussing it with you. But first, let's go ahead and do Derrick's favorite part of the show. What Star Wars t-shirts are we wearing this week? And if you are listening to episode 75 on just audio, then my friends, you're missing out because we have moved forward to join the rest of the 21st century. And soon you'll be able to check out a video recording of us. Kyle is here to help us make sure that goes as smoothly as possible on board the Drunken Gungan. Thanks to
That's going to take a lot of work too.
it
I'm just
will. It
telling you.
will. But it's thanks to some new piece of software from the Google crew. It's called StreamYard, and we are testing it out. You may have seen us using it for our live watch along episode back in episode 74 of What a Piece of Junk, where we watched live the first episode of the Book of Boba Fett. If you haven't checked that out with our commentary, I suggest that you pause this episode and go back and appreciate all of our off the cuff witticisms, right, Nathan?
Absolutely, yes. Right off this cuff. I'm not wearing cuffs, but pretend I am. Right off of those cuffs.
Indeed. And
In a suit? What?
speaking of you pretending to wear things, tell us about the shirt you have on this week because it is very appropriate for one of the topics at hand.
Yes, this is a new shirt for me. It has a warning sign on it. It says, "Beware the Wookiee." There's one of those yellow rectangular, like you would see when you're driving along. Hopefully, you'd see them. If you're not seeing them, you're probably going the wrong direction. But it has a silhouette of Chewbacca. But today, we need to be aware of a different Wookiee. We'll get into his name earlier or later, whichever one. But this is a new shirt for me. I got this shirt for Christmas. A good dear friend of mine, Captain Scott, got this shirt for me.
Boom shakalaka.
Thank you very much, Scott. I really appreciate it. And I was glad to see that it would be such an appropriate shirt for this episode. Derrick, you're wearing a shirt that doesn't seem to be appropriate for this episode, but it's one that I love nonetheless. Can you tell me more about your shirt?
Yeah, so actually I'm wearing it because it's long sleeve and it's a little bit cold. But it's my Ahsoka Tano shirt from her universe, which has got the orange and blue stripes and it's got the Tano on it and Ahsoka's whatever thing on her back, her logo kind of thing on the back neck portion there. So, but yeah, it's definitely a good shirt. I like it. It's comfy. It's thin, but yet it's long sleeve and it's nice. So it works well. So Scott, what Star Wars shirt do you have on this week?
So I also got a Star Wars shirt for Christmas, more than one, but this is one of the ones that my wife got for me. It is a la the classic Queen rock album cover where the band did Bohemian Rhapsody, and it has the members of the Bad Batch with their heads sort of floating in black silhouette, and so it's like
the OG Bad Batch.
That's right, the OG Bad Batch. It's like they're doing their whole reference to Queen there. So the 4 members of the team, you got Hunter, Tech, Crosshairs, and Wrecker, and they are doing their best. We are posing for a rock band cover effort there. Kyle, I see that you don't have on a Star Wars shirt, but you have on a cool shirt nonetheless.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you guys rock such awesome Star Wars shirts, but I felt like, we needed to give the network a little representation. So I went to tpublic.com. I got the Fandom Podcast Network logo t-shirt right here.
Nice.
And supporting the network support, I'm kind of sitting back in the producer's chair, letting you guys do your jobs this week, though. I don't know. I feel like, Scott, there's some shirt bribery going on with Nathan, maybe for more airtime or something like that here. Guys, if you guys just realize that if you want more airtime, you go through me. You don't go through Scott. So
you're saying that they should bribe you, not me.
Exactly.
Right.
Just
as long as
consider
we're
me
clear.
just consider me the Watto of the Fandom Podcast Network. That's all I'm saying, as far as that's concerned.
Now, if any of our listeners want to bribe us for airtime, if they send in a T-shirt, we will wear it for them.
Totally. And if you guys out there do want to get a cool shirt like Kyle's,
wait, stop.
Oh.
Before we go any further, it must be either a Star Wars shirt or a Fandom Podcast Network shirt, because you're opening the door to a Pandora's box there, Nathan, if you do not clarify.
All right, clarification. We will wear our Star Wars T-shirts, even if you send them in.
totally.
There we go.
And if you want to get a cool FPN shirt to bribe us with, just head on over to tpublic.com and search up Fandom Podcast Network in the search bar, and you will find an awesome store there where they sell not just t-shirts, but mugs and iPad cases and all kinds of things that I can't even think of right now. All right, well, it is time to introduce a brand new segment for the podcast. We're celebrating our 75th episode in style, and so we're going to do a little Star Wars Smackdown.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I was hoping for a sound effect there, but as I said, we're hanging on with all of the engineering with our new software.
New things, but we got all kinds of fun stuff going on here. So, but yes,
I'll do it
there's
again.
a thing called there's a thing called post edit. We will make sure that gets in there.
Yes. So what we're going to do each episode in the Star Wars Smackdown is we're going to have 2 characters from the Star Wars galaxy, and we're going to debate what would happen if the 2 of them went head to head and did a little fisticuffs action, some melee, if you will. So if you've ever found yourself sitting around with your friends and going, hey guys, who do you think would win if Darth Vader fought Count Dooku? Or if Watto had to face off against the chief of a Jawa tribe, etc., etc. And so for this episode's inaugural edition of Star Wars Smackdown, we're going to have 2 very timely guys face off against each other in hypothetical combat, and that would be the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy, or perhaps erstwhile bounty hunter, Boba Fett, versus the newest Wookiee menace that's out there in the spaceways, Black Krrsantan, or Krrsantan, depending on who you ask. So for the purposes of our debate, guys, assume that each of them is at the height of their powers. So Boba Fett is not suffering from Sarlacc digestive juices. Black Krrsantan is not, going through his annual Wookiee shedding period. So they're both raring to go, armed to the teeth with whatever their signature weapons are, and at the height of their physical prowess. So I'm going to open the floor with the discussion of who would win between Boba Fett and Black Krrsantan by going first to our resident Wookiee, Nathan himself. Nathan, who do you think would come out on top, and why?
All right. Well, I've got to pull for Wookiees whenever I can, and well, there's a Wookiee in this battle, so my gut instinct is to go for the Wookiee, and certainly Black Kursantan, which is how I'm going to go with the name. Yes, Black Kursantan has a physical strength advantage. Wookiees can rip people's arms out of their sockets, and obviously, if he can do that, he could do that to Boba Fett, and that would end the fight real quick, wouldn't it? But there is one key thing that you said, and that is assume that they are fully equipped, that they have all of their normal gear. And one thing that Boba Fett has that I think would really give him an advantage in this fight is the flamethrower. I don't know if you've ever smelled burnt Wookiee hair, but it does not smell good. So if they get close enough for a melee, I think Boba Fett takes it using the flamethrower. But if they can stay at range, that bowcaster has a lot of power. I think it might be able to get through that Beskar armor.
Interesting. I haven't thought about whether or not a bowcaster could penetrate Beskar. All right, moving along on the panel here. Derrick, we've got one vote for Black Chrysanthemum's going to win 9 times out of 10 there. What are your thoughts, Derrick? Is Boba Fett up the creek, or is he cool as a cucumber there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to take into different types of considerations. I mean, obviously, this is one Boba Fett's show, so Boba Fett would probably win, right? But my biggest thing, Nathan, wasn't the flamethrower; it was that Boba Fett's got a pocket Ming Na Wen in his back corner.
Okay, now that's cheating.
Is he part of his arsenal or not? I mean,
no. We got.
Doesn't he own her? Doesn't he?
I gotta lay out the categories here. The contest is 1-on-1 for Star Wars Smackdown, so you can't.
Okay.
Otherwise, Vader's just gonna call in a cadre of stormtroopers every time he has to be in one of these fights, right?
It's just you and me and my Star Destroyer
and my Death Star.
So, but yeah, well, that's the only way Grand Moff Tarkin could win, right? Because I mean, he's never gonna win. At least not in his old form. Maybe back in his heyday. But anyways, yeah. I would definitely. I think personally, if it was, well, the problem is I just don't know. I haven't seen him enough in action yet. I mean, hopefully we'll get that fight. I mean, that's what we'll talk about a little bit later here about that cool scene. So hopefully we get that actual fight down the line here. But I would say just from having the jetpack, having the flamethrower, having the harpoon or the grappling hook, I should say, having the whistling
birds.
Yeah, the whistling birds. Having that giant missile on the back, right? I mean, he's got the missile, so he's just got to get that close enough, and then it shoots him off. We've seen that in Mandalorian season 2, right? So with Cobb Vanth. So I would definitely say Boba Fett's got the weapons, but I would definitely agree that if it gets close enough, depending how much Black Chrysanthemum can take a hit, he might get close enough, and all he's got to do is just grab him with those Wookiee arms, and Boba Fett would have no more arms. So,
all right, so you got to.
I would say 6 and 4. If they had a match 10 times, Boba Fett would take it 6, and Black Chrysanthemum would take it 4 times.
Okay,
guys,
all right,
guys.
Yes.
Okay, it's Boba Fett. He's going to cheat because he's going to have some great Ewok barbecue in his utility belt. He's going to pull out, and no Wookiee can resist Ewok barbecue, and he's just going to throw it out there. Black's going to go run after it, and Boba's going to shoot him in the back. End of story. There you go. I mean, this isn't that hard.
Okay, I admit that there are certain Endorian meats that do lure certain Wookiees into certain traps. However, I don't think that was actual Ewok on that stick in Return of the Jedi.
No, it was Ewok prepared barbecue. That's what I'm saying. Ewok.
Okay. The Ewoks opened up their own little Mongolian barbecue place.
Exactly.
Okay,
Would they get some fresh stormtrooper?
Well, they have to get, after the Empire was taken off Endor, they've got to get commerce to Endor somehow. So.
Hey guys, how does Wicket cook his chicken fried rice?
With a steak?
He walks it. He walks it. Yeah.
Stop Bobby Wynn's dad joke of the week.
That's right, baby.
You're only allowed one per week, so that was it.
Oh no!
And it's Sunday, so it's the
I
whole
know
week.
it's only the first day of the week. Oh, what have I done? All right, well, so we've got Kyle saying that Boba Fett's going to win through chicanery or any methods necessary, and so I think I'm going to have to agree with those guys. Sorry, Nathan, but it's one more vote for the bounty hunter and not the Wookiee. Boba Fett's going to come up victorious here because we know that there's a Mandalorian tradition and a bounty hunter tradition for hunting down Wookiees as one of the most feared prey in all the galaxy. Even back in the day, and in some of the visual dictionaries,
The holiday
Boba
special.
Fett's and the holiday special, that's right. In the visual dictionary, though, you've got Boba Fett's armor has those braids on the right-hand side of the shoulder pad that are listed as Wookiee pelt braids. So he wears a badge of honor, if you will, that shows he was able to hunt down Wookiees and get their fur at the very least, if not killed them or turned them in for a bounty. So yeah, I think the man has experience in fighting the furry fiends, as it were, and I think he would know what to do when he had to go one-on-one with a Wookiee. So Black Chrysanthemum is a feared gladiator, and he's the new man on the scene, as it were, when it comes to Star Wars heavies. But I think Boba Fett's got it. Old age and treachery beats youth and exuberance every time.
Yeah, but Wookiees are always older than everyone.
That is a good point. So maybe I
Right.
just talked myself out of it.
But I would have to say that Black Chrysanthemum is young for a Wookiee.
Yes. Yeah.
But is that like Baby Yoda young type mentality where he could be
Chewbacca,
like 75 and he could still be a teenager?
Chewbacca was considered young for a Wookiee in A New Hope, and he was 200 years old. So it takes a while.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Anyways, fun segment, guys. So
Yeah. So, listeners out there, if you have a showdown that you'd like for us to debate here on Star Wars Smackdown, please, by all means, reach out to us between shows and send us an email or a tweet or whatever, and post in the Facebook group and tell us, hey, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on blank versus blank in the Star Wars galaxy. So next episode, we will have yet another Star Wars Smackdown.
and it'd
But-
be better if Facebook would allow polls.
It would be better if Facebook would allow polls. You can do polls on Twitter still, so I guess I could try to put up a poll there.
And then we can link it.
Yeah. I'll see about doing that sometime this week. But for now, I'm going to mosey on over to the bar here on Tatooine at Mos Espa, that being the sanctuary. Not just because I want to hang out with Jennifer Beals as a sexy Twi'lek chick, but because I'm going to grab something to wet my whistle and see what she might have to tell me in the way of Star Wars news and or rumors this week. Okay, great. Thank you. I am back from the bar, and this week I am wetting my whistle with some of Zoa Energy Drink. It is the energy drink created by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and so far I really enjoy this, you guys. But I have to say that I like the original flavor in the silver and black can. Kevin would be excited because those are Raiders colors. It's way better than the orange flavor that I tried. The orange flavor, this flavor tastes like a nice, refreshing, almost cola drink. The orange flavor tastes like it was carbonated water that was transported in the same truck as a box of oranges. That's about
Is
as
that
much.
an energy drink?
It is.
So
So
what you're telling me is it's Tang.
Woo.
What you're
It's-
telling me is that it's Tang.
No, Tang has a much stronger flavor than that.
Tang is much better than the Zoa orange. I got to be honest. It's like
Ouch.
LaCroix orange. I don't know if you've ever had LaCroix, but
Oh
ugh.
yes, yeah. Ugh.
You get on Twitter and tell Dwayne Johnson that he might come over and put you in a headlock.
Yeah, I'll be throwing hands and getting killed by the Rock while Timura Morrison comes and kills Kyle. So yeah, it'll be a rough week for the FPN.
Derrick, I think we should sell tickets.
Hey, sounds like pay-per-view. We're on StreamYard now.
Boom. Well, anyway, the bartender here at the sanctuary did give me a couple of tidbits of information. Guys, it looks like the guy who created Black Chrysanthemum, he himself is at a bit of a loss when it comes to the quote-unquote official pronunciation of the black and gray-haired Wookiee's name. So it is the comic book author Kieran Gillian. That's Kieran Gillen, not Karen Gilliam, as in the Doctor Who and Nebula actress. His name is spelled Kieron Gillen over on Twitter. And On January the 8th, he was tweeting often, "People have been asking me how you pronounce Black Chrysanthemum. I have no idea and would love to find out." So, Nathan, you were commenting earlier about how you weren't exactly sure how to pronounce the name. And here it turns out the man who created the character, who's only ever been in print, never in live action or voice or audio or animated form. So, yeah, we don't really know what the official pronunciation is. What do you guys think?
Well, Gillen himself did push, I do Karur Santan. So that's what I'm going with as an official pronunciation until we hear otherwise. But I do think that we will get an official pronunciation at some point in this series, because you don't have a shot like that on a character like that outstanding of a look and not bring that character back. So definitely this character is going to be a factor later in the series, and I hope we get to hear the name from somebody who speaks basic, not from one of the Hutts.
Yes, not from somebody who's speaking Huttese or Shirawuk. Derrick, what do you think? Is Mr. Gillen's approximation there of Karur Santan, is that right?
I mean, maybe if you were kind of doing it like half Wookiees, and that's what you're trying to get out, because any of the Wookiees I know of when they're translated into common tongue is more like sharp and not like drew out as much as that. I mean, because even Kashyyyk, when you say it, is still pretty quick, and it's not like Kashyyyk. You're trying to stretch out the letters or anything like that. So I would say Black Chrysanthemum is the way you would say it. But I would turn it over to Nathan if he wanted to say that I mispronounced Kashyyyk wrong.
Now, I will say when I was a kid and I had only ever seen the word Kashyyyk in the Star Wars card game, I pronounced it. I assumed that middle Y was its own syllable and pronounced it Kashyyyk.
Wow.
So I did draw that out quite a bit. I was wrong.
Partially.
Just
You got the
that
first
out there.
part and the last part, but that middle part was a little off.
Adding that extra Y, but it is how I remember that there are 3 Ys, because Wookiee pronunciations are not the best. I was impressed in Solo that they got Chewbacca to pronounce something similar enough to Chewbacca for us to actually recognize that as being his name.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Well, Kyle, what are your thoughts about this whole pronunciation thing? Is that the right way to say it, or are you just going to call him something completely different?
Well, I've seen a couple places on the internet who just say they call him Black K for short. So I'm thinking that might work. And to be honest with you, I hope I'm going to get myself in so much trouble with Tim Morrison before this episode is over, apparently. I really hope he isn't the first one to say his name, because no offense to Tim, but when it comes out with his heavy accent, yeah. maybe we let Ming-Na say this, or say the name first. Just, I'm just throwing that idea out there.
For me, I know that the Wookiee's initials are BK, so I may just offhandedly call him Burger King.
He's the king.
I don't recommend that. He will rip your arms out for that.
I was going to say, you could be missing a few appendages if you do that.
But Wikipedia does say that he has 3 potential nicknames, one of which is BK, one is Black K, and then the third is Santy.
Santy?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's his Christmas identity.
I don't know that I like that one.
I mean, it's no different than Chewy.
Yeah.
So that's probably what they're trying to go for. Something that's
huge, that's
like
true.
Chewy, but Santy. So, but there's then
shouldn't he be Karuri?
Karuri? No, Santy's a lot easier to say than Karuri. Curry. He's Curry.
Blackie would not be appropriate.
No.
No.
Nor can we refer to him as Special K. Apparently, that's something entirely different. So yeah,
maybe he has his own weight loss program.
No, yeah, BK. We're going
BK. BK. Yeah, that sounds good. And just a few more tidbits about BK from the Dr. Afra comics and a few other stories over the years. He was a fighter in a gladiator pit, and he and Boba Fett have worked together before because while after he escaped the gladiator pit, BK became a bounty hunter and worked for Jabba the Hutt and sometimes Darth Vader. So, if anybody out there has read the Dr. Aphra comic book series, I'm sure you know a good bit more about BK and his exploits during the Galactic Civil War era. So, I'm excited to see what the future holds for the character, especially on this streaming series. I think it's going to be great.
Can I just weigh in too? Seeing this character introduced on this series gave me hope that we're going to see one of my current favorite Star Wars characters in live action at some point. Maybe not in this series, but it gives me hope for Dr. Aphra live action.
Yes, that would be so great. I'm totally here for a Dr. Aphra streaming series, or at least having her be a character on one of the other series.
I mean, the good thing is that she is canon.
Yeah.
So that means that, Disney doesn't have to like try and like secretly add her in or something like that, like they've done with these Easter eggs and some of these other beloved characters. So from the expanded universe.
Yeah. Speaking of characters from the expanded universe, BK reminds me of a character from the expanded universe, Snuva.
Mm-hmm.
Snuva was also a Wookiee bounty hunter and mercenary. And Snuva tried to collect on Han Solo at one point. Similar kind of story. Being a Wookiee bounty hunter, I don't know how much more story you need. That's imposing enough. But
Get an eye patch too.
That's true. Yes, a little bionic eye there. But I almost feel like they have created this character as a replacement for Snuva. So I don't think Snuva's ever going to make it back into canon. I think we get BK instead.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I think it's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, the only other piece of Star Wars news is a heavy rumor that I got from the bartender here. Our friends over at MSN have shared a link to Cinema Blend's story. Wild Star Wars rumor claims Harrison Ford will return for one more Han Solo appearance. Guys, the rumor here is that while he was doing de-aging scenes for Indiana Jones Part 5, that Harrison Ford recorded some Han Solo scenes where they're going to de-age him somewhat in the way that they did for Mark Hamill when he returned to The Mandalorian to play a younger Return of the Jedi era Luke Skywalker, and that Ford is going to be Han Solo at least one more time, possibly for the Book of Boba Fett or The Mandalorian Season 3. Take this with a huge grain of salt, of course, because this is all just rumor, but it's certainly possible and even plausible in this era of Disney doing the whole de-aging thing. So I'll throw it out there to let's start with you, Kyle. What do you think about this possibility?
I think this is a lot of people speculating on something they would like to see. First of all, considering how well they hid the secret of Luke being in the end of Mandalorian season 2, I would think they would treat this very much the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think Harrison's done. I think Harrison did what he wanted to do, and I don't think Harrison's very much stick to his guns. The only thing I could think of that would bring him back is seeing what they did with Mark Hamill and the respect they gave Luke in The Mandalorian. Maybe he feels like he would get that with Han Solo. But I don't know if I see at this point where it even fits really into any of the storylines per se. I think it would feel a little bit too much like a shoehorn in of this character, kind of writing what they did with Luke at the end of Mandalorian. And I really don't think that's the way Favreau and Filoni really want to go with these shows, where they're doing things just because they can, not because they want to. I think they have a plan. I don't see it happening. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of where I see it at right now.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. For me, I like the idea, and narratively speaking, the writer in me says, if the Book of Boba Fett continues down the storyline that we seem to be getting so far, again, only 2 chapters in, but only 7 chapters total, it's about Fett sort of, I don't want to say making amends, but changing his outlook on life and going back and revisiting some of his attitudes toward other people. I think you could make a case for Boba Fett goes and makes amends with Han Solo. as part of his whole turning over a new leaf thing. And so that's why he would have to seek out Solo, in the current timeline and talk to a somewhat younger Harrison Ford. Would that be good Star Wars storytelling? I don't know. I'm not sure how much I'm dying to see the original trilogy actors do this whole de-aging thing and act like they're still in their 30s or 40s. I'm on the fence about it, but I do see it as a possibility, and even more so of a possibility than I would have 3 years ago if we were discussing this hypothetical. Before we saw Mark Hamill come back as Luke for one more story with the Mandalorian. Derrick, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to have to disagree because he'd have to do that with every bounty he's ever had.
Maybe so, but then again, how many of the other ones got disintegrated?
Oh, well, who knows? I mean, depends on the bounty, right? Because sometimes they have to bring him in alive. Because I mean, that was the whole point with Harrison Ford. Jabba wanted him alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't. It just doesn't seem anything like. I get what you're saying. Like it's supposed to be like, oh, he's going to find Han Solo, and he's not going to kill Han Solo. But let's move on from that. Like that's what this is all about. That's part of the reason. We'll get into when we review the next episode. Some of my feelings, but I don't care. Like to me, the only thing I wanted to see the original heroes from was when they were supposed to be all together with themselves. I mean, the whole thing with Mark Hamill, yes, that was cool. Don't get me wrong, and it made sense. But I mean, that legitimately made sense in the way that it's a story and what we could potentially get with Luke because they ruined Luke. They didn't ruin Han Solo to me. Han Solo really, honestly, was doing what he thought was right, and sacrificing himself. And if they would have done more in developing Kylo Ren's character rather than making it stupid, that it could have actually meant something. But the character himself with Han Solo, I don't think they did any disservice to him. But really, like I said, this point in time, and we're never going to get it because, again, we just celebrated Carrie Fisher's 5th year anniversary of her passing. We're never going to get the original four together ever again. So at this point in time, it's like, okay, whatever. If they're going to do something, not to say it's like, okay, cool, whatever, but it's not like I'm clamoring for a Han Solo story because really at the end of the day, we need Solo 2, and that needs to be with Alden. They need to move on. The same thing, like I said, like doing the respect that they did to or for Mark Hamill with the Luke Skywalker was great, but at the end of the day, they need to move on from Mark Hamill. They need to get somebody younger to be able to reprise that role because, again, I'm perfectly fine them taking and somebody recasting it if they're going to do what I call doing it right and doing, the further stories of Luke and Han and Leia. Like recast them, that's fine. Let's move on.
All right, Nathan, what do you think about this rumor? Harrison Ford coming back.
It's Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford argued to George Lucas that Han Solo should be killed off in the original trilogy. I don't think he wants to come back as Han Solo. If he does, I think it's going to be because they threw a ton of money at him, and they don't really need to. So I don't think it's going to happen. If it does, I'll be shocked. I'm not going to say I'll eat my hat because I got plenty of them over there, and I don't want to eat any of them. But I'd be shocked. If they want to have Boba Fett go and make amends with people, I could see that being part of the story. Winter Soldier did some of that. He had his book in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier of people that he needed to go make amends with. And it could be that the Book of Boba Fett is actually a book of a list of names of people that Boba Fett needs to go make amends with. But if they're going to do that, I think they could have him come up to Chewbacca and bring Jonas back so that you have the actual actor, someone who's young enough to actually play that role and not have to try to do all this de-aging, or go an even more fun route. There is one other major character that Boba Fett needs to make amends with, and we know about this because we watched it in the cartoons. Mace Windu. Bring back Samuel L. Jackson if you're going to bring somebody back.
That would be wild.
From the dead.
Yeah.
He's not dead. This is Star Wars.
Yeah, classic.
He fell out of a window.
Yeah, classic I'm not dead. Yeah.
People fall from much greater heights and somehow return in Star Wars.
But my funny thing is you guys are trying to cast Boba Fett like he needs to do this. Why would he be running an underground crime syndicate then? Like you don't try to reprimand your ways and still do illegal things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. At the end of the day, we're just seeing Boba Fett in a lighter tone where he's going to run with respect instead of fear. But at the end of the day, he's still a bad guy.
He is, yeah. So I don't think that he's going to go make amends in the first place. But if he did, like if that's the route that they wanted to go, I still don't think they'd bring back Harrison Ford for it.
Well, okay, can I throw out an idea here? If instead of going that route with Boba Fett being like the crime boss that he is, don't use Han Solo. Use Chewbacca. Have him come across Chewbacca in some way. That makes so much more sense to me.
Especially since we already have a Wookiee in the story.
Yeah.
And of course, there is the possibility that Ford is coming and has recorded de-aged Han Solo stuff, but it wouldn't be for this show or The Mandalorian. There are several Star Wars shows on the horizon, many of which take place at a time when Han Solo could have been a much younger guy.
Then why not play Alden then instead of
I agree with Derrick. You use Alden in that case, and
like Star Wars fans are clamoring for Solo too. Why would Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni not cater to that?
And it could very well be that Alden doesn't want to do it on a series. He only wants to do it in a movie, and so he said no. Or it could be that they saw the amount of media coverage and the clamoring of attention that Mark Hamill's return generated, and they want to recapture that zeitgeist. So they want it's not to be too hyperbolic, but it's stunt casting for Harrison Ford to be de-aged.
But if they do that, then it's never special again. That's the problem. If they do that with every freaking series, then it's no longer who cares. It's like, okay, who's going to be the special guest this time?
And I'm just going to throw this out. Alden can't say no. He does still have a contract with Lucasfilm.
He has a contract. Now, the interesting thing would be, is that contract for films or for streaming series or for any and all production? That's the real question.
Probably for
I bet
hours.
any. It's probably for hours or any all production. Would be
or it could also be, you guys, I mean, as much as we all loved it, Solo was quote unquote considered a box office bomb. Maybe they've already bought him out and that contract is null.
I haven't heard anything on that, but it's a good point. So.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
I was going to say, at the end of the day, if we're going to see Kira, then we're probably going to see a Han Solo. But I would hope it's Alden rather than, because that makes more sense.
Alden and Jonas.
Yeah, because if we're going to see Kira, then it would make sense that we see Kira and not Harrison Ford. Or if we're going to see Emilia Clarke, I should say. If we're going to see her, we should see Alden.
If Ford does come back for something, I would prefer it not to be the Book of Boba Fett and for it to be something that is set much closer to The Force Awakens. And not... they probably still do makeup, but not necessarily do all the de-aging process.
And so, for the record, I agree with you guys. I would prefer it to be Alden Ehrenreich playing a young Han Solo in a different story, not Book of Boba Fett. But my official prediction here on January 9th is that it will be Harrison Ford de-aged for the finale of Book of Boba Fett, because he and Boba Fett will not be there for Boba Fett to make amends, but rather they'll be working a job together. They won't know it at first, but Boba Fett will have to go meet some secret contact, and it will turn out to be Han Solo himself, and the two of them will, quote-unquote, make amends by working together on whatever job that is in the finale. Yeah, Derrick's like, I hate this idea. I'm not saying this is what I want.
I don't hate it. I just boo this man.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I want it to happen. That's just what I predict will be happening. So
the one point I have in favor of that is in The Force Awakens, Han did say that he went back to the one thing that he knew, and that was
smuggling.
Yeah.
But I think it's too early for that. I'd have to inspect the timeline, but I think at this point,
they did it now before Harrison dies. It'll be in season 2.
Maybe so.
That's possible.
Yeah, totally. All right, cool. Well, that is just about it for my, Star Wars news and rumors this episode. When we come back, we will be discussing the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 2. But first, let's take a break so that Kevin can tell you all about all the other shows here on the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derrick, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Kevin. Man, some of those shows sound pretty cool. And speaking of pretty cool shows, it is now our favorite time of reviewing these streaming episodes with y'all. We're going to jump right into the 5 questions, or thereabout, as we discuss Chapter 2 of the Book of Boba Fett, The Tribes of Tatooine. So first up, we're going to do the traditional questions like we did with the Bad Batch and the Mandalorian. Nathan, I will kick it over to you to start with. What was your favorite part of this episode?
I have to admit, this is a really difficult question on this episode because there's so many things that happened. I think that my favorite single moment was probably seeing the Hutts, the twins, carried on their litter, because we kept hearing about, oh, I didn't see your litter coming. That's why I was surprised that you showed up. I was expecting your litter. And the whole time I'm thinking, what difference does it make if he's in a litter? You know, that's only slightly bigger than if he's just walking. Yeah, no, now I understand. Like, there was no way that you were missing the Hutt litter. That thing took up the whole street. It was basically a parade.
Yes.
And seeing so many people have to carry that thing, that's just so mean to make people carry Hutts, because Hutts are not light. Never tried to lift one, but I guarantee you, they're huge. And to carry 2 of them at the same time, it was really just an impressive display. Now, I will say the CGI on the Hutts, I don't think is Disney's best. I don't think it was terrible, but it could have been better. But overall, that display was just amazing and probably my single favorite moment. That said, there's a lot of great moments in this episode, so I'm sure we'll talk about more of them.
Oh, yeah, it was a chock-a-block full of awesome Star Wars goodness. Derrick, what was your favorite part of Chapter 2?
I was happy we got to see the Pykes, because I said that's what I wanted to do, was see the Pykes.
Yeah.
So we got to see the Pykes, and we got a train heist out of it. So that's always my top priority. And probably the coolest scene was whatever, I don't know what the specific name of the one Tusken Raider with the black dreadlocks. But yeah, that one where that Tusken Raider is riding on the bike, and all of a sudden just like being a complete bad A and just driving it off, and then launching the Tusken himself off into the train was pretty cool. And then the whole like going through like the cab, and just you see all the shadows and just beating up all the pike guards and then popping up and everything. So yeah, that was probably the coolest part was the train heist and seeing the Pikes.
Excellent. Kyle, as our special guest / producer / entrepreneur, which was your favorite part of Chapter 2?
It's guys, I agree with Nathan. It's the twins coming and the introduction to BK. That whole sequence was just phenomenal, and to have, like I said before, to have BK introduced opens up the door to Dr. Aphra and so many other characters, and I'm really hoping that pays off. Maybe not in the Book of Boba Fett, but later on down the line. But what I like about that too is it really does show that, hey, we're going to bring you some surprises in Book of Boba Fett, and I'm really glad for that. I'm curious to see what's going to happen going further with the twins. But yeah, that's probably my favorite single scene in this episode. And I'm with Nathan, both of you, all you guys, and saying too. It's hard to pick just one scene because this episode was phenomenal. I loved everything with the train, everything with that. It was a phenomenal episode.
For me, it's got to be it's also the scene where the Hutt twins show up on the litter. But the one tiny little character detail that I liked about that scene the most out of the whole episode was Boba Fett told Fennec Shan, "Watch my back," and she immediately just gets into casual assassin mode and is like leaned up against the thing and has the rifle in a very relaxed pose. But you see her, get ready for action. She's fearless. She's ready to do whatever he asks at a moment's notice, and is just completely and totally devoted to her boss, her partner, what have you. And she's just ready to throw down. She's like, "We'll have to get permission to kill the Hutts," but that was her not saying, "No, I refuse to kill the Hutts." That was her saying, "I'm ready to take this forward. Just tell me what to do. I know which piece of paperwork to fill out to murder some Hutts."
Let's get the proper documentation so that way it's less documentation before we kill them.
Yeah, I do like the idea though. Who would she have to get permission from to kill the twins? The other Hutts.
I agree. I think it's the other Hutts.
It would have to be. I'm sure in Nalhutta, which if we get to go visit, would be super cool.
Yes.
But I believe it would have to be in order to kill a Hutt as a criminal underground. You probably have to, because otherwise, then you get basically all the Hutts after you.
Yeah, total anarchy, as it were.
There's one possibility. We have seen in previews Boba Fett going to what looks like a meeting of crime lords that are not necessarily Hutts.
Yeah.
So it may be other crime lords, not just the Hutts, but I think the Hutts definitely need to sign on, or otherwise, as Derrick mentioned, you're going to get all the Hutts coming down on you. And
yeah.
That's a lot of Hutt.
Yeah, I think that could be
including Peach to the Hutt,
especially to come down on you.
Yeah, considering we just found out how much Jabba the Hutt weighs.
Yeah. So anyway, I think yes, Nathan, you're probably onto something with that table scene. It's like the crime syndicates, all of the families, with their little contracts or their treaties, their peace treaties, as it were, their trade negotiations. You stay on your turf, I'll stay on my turf. Kind of, let's divvy up the underworld of the galaxy. All right, well, time for a little less positive review here. What was your least favorite part of the episode? We'll go back around the other way here. So, Kyle, what did you like least out of Chapter 2?
Okay, there's two things. One's a technical issue, and the other one is a scene. Lizard in my sinuses? No, just absolutely not. That's just, I'm out right there, and that's that. Yeah. There was a couple of shots though where, especially when they were on the speeders, where you could really tell they were in the volume, and there was it was really noticeable green screen, and I haven't seen that a lot with the Star Wars shows to this point, where you could tell they were in the volume, and they kind of let a couple of these shots slip through, and I think that was just kind of, for a brief moment, kind of put me out of the show for just that brief second on that. But other than that, yeah, no lizards, no sinus lizards. Thank you.
But don't you feel relieved knowing that Boba Fett has now saved 15% on his car insurance? Thank you very much.
Oh.
All right, Nathan. Other than that joke I just made, what was your least favorite part about this episode?
Yeah, no, I have to agree. Lizard in the nose. I cringed at that. Yeah, the mere thought of it just really took me out of it. Not sure how that doesn't kill him, but it's not the first time we've seen creatures in Star Wars go into people's brains and not kill them. Or science fiction in general is famous for that sort of thing.
Poor Gullet will know the truth. Oh, sorry. Flashbacks to Rogue One. My bad.
Yeah, that was probably my least favorite part of Rogue One, come to think of it, because that storyline didn't really go anywhere. But that's a whole nother movie. No, that seeing the lizard jump into Tamora Morrison's nose, but was not a fan. Could have.
I thought he was going to have it as a pet too.
Oh, I did too.
He thought it was going to be a pet as well. I love the part where he's like, "Oh, it's a lizard. Well, I'll be sure to let him get."
I will take that back. I did not think it was going to be his pet, but only for one reason, and that is because I did see somebody on Twitter say before I got to see the episode, I thought Boba Fett was going to get a pet. And then when I saw the lizard, I thought, oh, yeah, this has to be the scene. Somehow they're like eating this thing or something. It was or something. It was not eating it.
Yep. So you may have had the initial reaction that person on Twitter was, not telling the truth. Lies, deception. But then the big octopus showed up, and you knew it was the truth. All right, Derrick, what was your least favorite part of this episode?
It's probably the same as the first one. Kind of the pacing and the way they're putting this all together. I don't care for the back and forth as much. I really wish they would have just streamlined it from him coming out of the Sarlacc pit and just really telling this whole backstory for the first half of the Book of Boba before we jumped into the current timeline.
You mean no flashbacks? Just keep it all.
Yeah, the flashbacks.
Right
I'm just not enjoying it going back and forth. Like I get it, but not every episode. Like if it just would have been the first episode, okay, great, done. But we're literally looks like we're going to get it like we jump in every, the beginning of it every time. And it's just like, man, this is just not what I just don't like the way they're doing it this way. Again, I'm loving everything I'm watching. So, let's just say once we get all 7 chapters, if someone wants to go through and re-edit it and put it in an actual timeline appropriation, then I'm all for it. So, and I think that would make it better because that's kind of what a lot of other people that are not liking it is what one of their biggest complaints is the jumping back and forth. And then some of the other ones aren't liking as much as we are. Like, we'll get into like with the whole Tusken culture and stuff, which is phenomenal and stuff like that. But outside of that, I think that's the biggest thing hurting the Book of Boba is that it's doing this constant flashbacking and jumping back and forth.
Yeah. And I will say, if I may jump in on that point as well, this felt like 2 episodes.
Yes.
It felt like we had the Hutt episode, and then we also had the Tusken episode. And had it been 2 actual episodes, that probably would have worked better.
I think for me, the whole non-linear storytelling, the flashback and then the current and then, etc. Hollywood is way too enamored of that idea at the current moment. And I think, unfortunately, it's because of some weird market research about people's attention spans. And they think that in an era of TikTok and, YouTube and all this stuff with the quick, tiny, short form things, that Hollywood is convinced that if they stick to linear traditional storytelling in a TV show or a movie, that the audience will get bored and they'll either tune out or they will then, after it's over, put some review where they're like, I hated this because it was so slow and boring and blah, blah, blah. And so to counteract that concern, I think that the suits, the powers that be, have decided that nonlinear storytelling is the way to do it, because if you keep hopping back and forth between different storylines, then it's almost like you're changing the channel for the viewer, so they won't leave your content and go do something else. I think that fear is unfounded, but I believe that it permeates a lot of things because you've seen so many genre films and movie series and shows doing this exact same idea, nonlinear storytelling of,
Well,
this episode.
and I get it because Robert Rodriguez obviously has done a lot of work with Quentin Tarantino, so that can make sense. But it's not a Quentin Tarantino movie, right? Where it's not all coming together. It's literally 7 episodes, right? It's not like it's a 2.5 hour movie where it would make sense then if we get a Quentin Tarantino twist, right? And timeline. We're not getting that. So to me, that's where I said, like, at the end, once we see all 7 chapters, it might make more sense, but at the same time, I'd rather just have it go chronological.
Kyle?
2 things. The flashback thing, I blame 2 shows for. Lost and Arrow. Because they played up on the flashbacks so highly, and those were 2 very popular shows, and Hollywood is a copycat business.
Oh yeah.
And I don't even think it's necessarily because, attention span. I think it's more of just like, hey, flashbacks, people like them, we're gonna put them in. And it's one of the things I noticed, at least with this episode of Book of Boba Fett, this was a long episode. This was a 52-minute episode. So I think what they're kind of accounting for those flashbacks by extending out the episode somewhat. My biggest problem with the flashback, I love the story of the flashback, but you're just getting into what's happening in quote unquote current time. And then you go to this flashback and it kind of takes you out of it because you're so into what you're seeing in current time. And then it's like flashback and you kind of got to reset yourself. And I don't know if that might work for a younger generation, but like people of our age and that we want more of that linear storyline telling. And I think that is something that is starting to make a comeback. But in this case too, I think what you're having is these flashbacks are going to tie in together to things that are going to be happening probably in episodes. I'm going to say like 5, 6, and 7, where the importance of these flashbacks are going to be relevant in the quote unquote current time. It's just it's a little bit it's a little bit frustrating because both storylines are so well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my least favorite. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nathan.
I'm not terribly familiar with Lost, but with Arrow, I will say there is one big difference in that they made sure that whatever was happening in the storyline in the current episode and whatever happened in the flashback had some sort of parallel. There was some meaning or point or parallel that existed between the two. And this episode in particular really felt like there was no parallel. It was just, here's this storyline, sudden cut to this other storyline. And I agree with Kyle. This would have worked better if they had said, this is 2 episodes. Even just putting in, here's some credits, here's the show opener, right in the middle, would have made this feel better.
Yeah. So Kyle saying that Hollywood is a copycat business segues perfectly into my least favorite part of this episode. And it's a symptomatic, I'm afraid, of a bigger issue that I'm having with Star Wars streaming series is this episode of Boba Fett felt like it had borrowed parts from other Star Wars productions in the contemporary era. And by that I mean, when Boba goes out to the wreckage in the desert and he crafts his own gaffy stick, it was like the Mandalorian visiting the armorer in season 1. It felt almost exactly the same beat for the story beat, right down to I'm here to get new weapons that I have now quote unquote earned by doing some other trial as a hero. It's very Joseph Campbell, which I love. The hero with 1,000 faces. It's obviously part of Boba Fett's hero's journey. Further evidence for my feeling that they are trying to transform him and redeem Boba Fett in this series. And it was a cool scene, and it's a great moment in any hero's journey when you get your fabled weapon. Boba Fett now has his Excalibur that he is ready to go and take, as he faces down whatever trial he is on his way to next. He has passed his initiation into the tribe, etc., etc. But it was just very much the same as what we saw in season 1 of The Mandalorian when Din Djarin had to go to the armorer and get essentially accepted and blessed by her with the whistling birds and new armor and replacing the parts of his armor that were broken, etc., etc. Right down to it's a big forge and it's in this desolate place amongst this endangered tribe of people that are set apart from the society around them. And then in addition to that whole, it's the armorer scene feeling, there was a train job in this episode. And I felt like it was Solo. Right? In Solo, we had it's not even that it was copying Westerns, because it definitely was, Or as some people have said online, it copied Lawrence of Arabia with the desert train scene, and it certainly did, but it copied from itself. Star Wars is copying Star Wars with the train job that we saw in Solo, which was also based on Western train jobs and so on and so forth. I mean, I love Dave Filoni's writing style. I love Jon Favreau's ideas about Star Wars. I love Star Wars, obviously. But I don't want it to be where every story is essentially the same story. I want the studio to not be gun shy about what happened with The Last Jedi and to a lesser extent The Rise of Skywalker. Don't be afraid to try something different. The greatest teacher failure is. And it's okay if you fail, but you gotta branch out and be the maverick, because that's George Lucas's spirit that makes Star Wars into something more than the sum of its parts. And right now, the Book of Boba Fett does not feel that way to me. It feels like it's trying to take all of the Star Wars stuff that they know fans like and roll it into one thing. And I think actually, as we've seen some people on social media complain, they don't like the recipe so far because it's too much leftovers.
It's pretty predictable.
Yes, predictable is the word I was trying to avoid, but absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. When we talked about what is our favorite part of this episode, there are a lot of parts of this episode that are great moments. They don't necessarily congeal into one awesome episode. It's a lot of individually good moments that aren't adding up to more than the sum of their parts.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Kyle.
I was just gonna say, as far as the train speeder goes, yeah, I had a little bit of that Solo vibe, but it fit for this because we find out the train is carrying spice on it, and I think that's going to be a key thing as Boba. What we're seeing is what gets Boba to want to take over the chair, the Jabba's underground world, and we're getting there. And I think they're trying to tell that story. One of the things too is there were some serious crack shots on that speeder train.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're flying and they're nailing things. So there's that. But I also think too, where the issue we're having, I think, with this is it's not so much to me like they're just trying to throw everything what people want in Star Wars. What I think that what the issue might be is maybe this isn't the Boba Fett everybody wanted to see. People want to see the bounty hunter Boba Fett. And I think there's a little bit of that in there. I'm fine. I mean, I'm really enjoying this storyline, but I can see where there are people who's like, no, we want to see the bounty hunter Boba Fett, not this, I'm going to rule in respect and things like that. And I'm just wondering if maybe some of this story this could be a darker storyline, and where we're going is he's going to try this, realize it doesn't work, and you have Fennec kind of talking about this, and then he goes back to some of those more over the crossing the line ways he had. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because I'm not convinced that this is going to be the only season of the show either. I think
that's true. Yeah, I think it's very likely that there could be a season 2. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that is kind of key here is when you compare it to Mandalorian had so much freedom to it because it didn't have pre-existing characters in it. Everything was new with Mandalorian. With Boba Fett, and I talked about this in the first episode too, you have checkmark boxes you have to hit. Mm-hmm. And I think we're getting to the point where we're just about out of the way of those. But I think we're feeling kind of with the flashbacks is preventing us from moving forward with the main story of Boba Fett. However, just in closing of this thought out, whoever's running the Tusken Raiders PR team for Star Wars, they're doing a phenomenal job because no race has been completely reclassified thanks to the Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett like the Tusken Raiders have.
Yes, totally. Excellent segue to our third normal question here, which is what connections did you see to the larger Star Wars galaxy? And so, Kyle, you want to jump right back in and talk about Tuskens for a second here?
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously the Tuskens, which really all we've ever seen them until Mandalorian was as these like just violent tribal creatures from whether it's Star Wars or you go back to the prequel trilogy. And then we see in Mandalorian, there's a lot more to the Tusken Raiders. And now we're really seeing inside their culture. And I like how they even say not all tribes are like this tribe. There are savage tribes out there. So I think that's a very interesting aspect. I think obviously others connections to the Star Wars universe. We're seeing the underworld of the Star Wars universe, which is something I think we're all dying to really see expanded out, because I think we've been teased with that so much, and we get little pieces here and there. And I think that's one of the frustrations with the flashback too. So many people want to see this underworld, but then they're taking us back to this flashback.
But we did get underworld, at least in the flashback with the
Yeah,
punch.
we did.
We did.
So we got something.
But I mean, I think the other aspect is, as far as connective tissue is, I go back to, I think they've got this plan for more than just this season. I think this is a 2 or 3 season show that they've got kind of mapped out. This first season is going to be flashbacks to kind of set up where Boba was when we get to the beginning of Mandalorian and where he's gone to. And then the second season, you'll still have some flashbacks, but you're going to maybe see more of his days as a bounty hunter flashback and develop that more. But that's just speculation on my part, but what I might hope to see. But there's so many other tie-ins. We see some classic tie-ins, and Dave and John did what they do best. They bring out the obscure Star Wars and put it there, and everybody absolutely loves it. And that's one of the things I love with especially with Dave and John, is they find those. They're not big things, but they're obscure things that we remember loving as a kid in Star Wars, or know about the cult following of certain things, like in this particular episode. And I know we'll get to that in a little bit, but that's one of the things that I as far as connecting to the rest of the galaxy, they do a good job with the little things.
Totally. Derrick, what connections did you see in this episode?
So, well, first, it's definitely a storytelling of comparing the Tusken Raiders to Native Americans, hugely in this story, right? I mean, you made a comment, guys, about like the crack shots from the train, right? And really, it's just showing the poor massacre of these Tusken Raiders, right? And almost wiping them out, with their tribes and what they're doing. And it is 100%. And then you can also see that Tamora Morrison had some influence in the storytelling, or at least it was inspired by having him play Boba Fett, because of the whole Haka dance and them dancing in the fire, right? So it's definitely a very telling story of tribals in current society, as well as in some past, society, or, in the past there in history. So I think there's definitely a lot of thing that relates to it. But in the connection of everything with this, I mean, obviously, if you go, back to the flashbacks, you talked a little bit about it, Scott, which you didn't like, but I actually liked having Boba Fett find his weapon and having to carve it from the armor, because I think it helped tell the story of the Tusken Raiders, right? So it almost shows you that the Tusken Raiders and the Mandalorians aren't that far apart from each other, if you think about it.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
That they're very similar, and that's where Boba Fett can be with them, right? And that's how he's able to somewhat communicate, and they're able to be, because at the end of the day, they're all warriors, right? They're all just a people, and they're trying to survive. And, and even though Boba Fett talks like, I'm not a Mandalorian, but at the same time, he was, raised on those traditions, right? And the things that Jango did. So I think that is probably the overall connecting, where you're actually seeing the similarities, even though they don't necessarily, everybody speaks and understands each other initially. But I think that is. And then the last thing we talked about was the big connection was obviously with Black Chrysanthemum and Dr. Aphra. That will be huge, because that is definitely a fan base that's clamoring for it. Now, it'll be interesting, because Dr. Aphra is obviously canon, like we talked about, and she is, I guess, OG, but pre-OG canon, right? She's early on. She's after the Clone Wars, but before A New Hope. So it's in that canon with Darth Vader that, we would get her. And obviously, if Black Chrysanthemum's then we know he's obviously, 20 years later or so, when he's appearing here. So I definitely think there's some overall connectivity to the comics and the novels, which is great.
Yeah. Nathan, what did you see as connections to the broader Star Wars galaxy?
All right. Well, I've got 2 big connections. There's lots of connections in this episode. As we mentioned, there's lots of great moments in this episode that don't necessarily all hook together, but a lot of them hook to other things in Star Wars. But the 2 big ones I want to bring up, one is Boba Fett himself. he reminds me a lot more in this episode of a clone trooper from the Clone Wars than from what we typically imagine Boba Fett to be just based on the original trilogy. I could see a clone trooper, CT, whatever, trying to explain to some primitive backwater inhabitant, oh yeah, riding this speeder, it's just like riding Cladu or whatever riding animal they have. And part of that may just be the fact that Dave Filoni's working on this, and he worked on the Clone Wars, so that may be some of his writing showing through. But it made sense though. The clone troopers were cloned from Jango Fett. They act a lot like Jango Fett would act. Now, of course, they were modified to take orders, and Boba was not. But personality-wise, it makes sense that there's some connection there. The other thing that I think was really interesting was at the beginning of the episode when they dropped the assassin into the Rancor pit. And this was interesting because it hits different people different ways depending on how much you've watched outside of the Book of Boba Fett. We, of course, all watched The Bad Batch. So we know that Bib Fortuna had his own Rancor named Muchi. So for us, we're watching that going, oh my gosh, is this Muchi? Or like, is something actually here? Does he actually have a Rancor here? And of course, if you only watch the original trilogy, you're looking at that going, well, of course there's no Rancor. Luke killed the Rancor. Why would the audience expect there to be anything there? So I think that was a really interesting touch of kind of subverting, okay, if you've watched enough, you know enough, you might just be wrong.
Yep.
But if you haven't watched the rest of the stuff, then you're just going to be, oh yeah, well, of course. No, we knew it was the whole time.
Well, what that scene proved is never play poker with Fennec Shand.
Yes.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
I was hoping for a cameo of a Rancor, though. I did. I was secretly saying, like, hey, let's get a cameo. But yeah, we knew untimely that Mochi does not exist anymore.
Yeah. All right. Well, for me, the biggest connection that I enjoyed between this and the larger Star Wars galaxy is there was a cool, almost little throwaway line from the Tusken chieftain to Boba Fett when he said that his people had been in that area since before the oceans vanished. And I love that callback to thousands and thousands of years ago, as we learned in the old EU, Legends of the Jedi or Origins of the Jedi. Tatooine was a beautiful, verdant, green paradise of a world. And, there were scenes in those stories from the really, really long time ago Jedi tales about Tatooine being a lush, beautiful, forested world with beautiful oceans and cities and technologies. And I just love this idea that we're living in this, the Star Wars galaxy is one of these post-apocalyptic kind of places. And, the planets are all much, much older than most people who live upon them now realize. And that if you were to dig down deep into the sands of Tatooine, you could find ruins and technologies from long lost civilizations that would just blow the mind of even the people who travel faster than the speed of light on a routine basis. The golden age of technology in the Star Wars galaxy was not prior to what was not the Grand Republic. It was way before all of that. And it was stuff that was technology so high up above what we have in the current timeline that it would just seem like unto the gods for these people. And so I love the idea that they mention that grand history. Now, part of that, of course, is because I'm such a huge fan of Star Wars: The Old Republic video game, but I also love the idea of bringing in to the concept into the Star Wars universe, this very hard sci-fi concept of no, this is more like the third or fourth age for most of this galaxy. It is not a young galaxy. And, as Ozymandias says, look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair, but there's nothing left because that was so long ago. So yeah, I love that the chief, his people at least, have that oral tradition of storytelling to where they can remember when Tatooine was a beautiful green place and not just this ball of dust in the middle of nowhere. if there's a bright center to the galaxy, this is the planet that is farthest from. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, we've got a couple customized questions for this episode. So, Nathan, take it away with customized question number 4.
All right. The first customized question we have here relates to the train job. Boba Fett hit that train. Now, of course, he hit that train just because it was messing with the Tuskens, but it turned out that it was manned by the Pykes, and they were transporting some substance. We don't know what it would look like or anything, but it looks like that spice right over there. So what does it mean for the criminal underworld at large that Boba Fett hit the Pykes and specifically made them walk out of the Dune Sea? Derrick, what do you think the criminal underworld is going to think of that?
Well, I was surprised that Boba Fett actually attacked the Pykes, knowing that the Pykes are a lot more spread across than this small Tusken tribe, right? And I assumed that it was going to be like, well, if you kill them off and you steal their spice, they're going to come back for you, because we've seen this already, right? With the Pykes, they don't like it, right? I mean, we've seen this quite a bit. So the fact that, and I get it that, Boba Fett's trying to claim stake and this is their Dune Sea, and that, you have to pay them to travel it, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but you got maybe 50, 60 of these Tusken Raiders, and the Pykes have how many people with weapons? Well, I mean, we already watched them wipe them out, like you said, with the crack shot. So I'm not 100% sure with that, with the whole point of Boba Fett trying to pick a fight in a sense, because at the end, Boba Fett doesn't have his armor at this point either. So maybe if he had that, it might, maybe he could take out a couple hundred of them by himself before they hit the Tusken Raiders. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I'm super excited because it's bringing that link together, right? That we're talking about. Between the underworld and, if we see the Pykes, doesn't mean we won't see the Crimson Dawn, and obviously we've already seen some of the Hutts. So
I think for me, having Boba Fett go up against the Pykes, it shows that the Pykes are going to be a villain in this series. I think in the finale, or at least leading up to the finale, he's going to have to deal with them again. The ramifications of this action of taking out the spice train they're going to catch up with him. And I think that if he does have to end up working with Han Solo, we'll get a classic moment of Pykes, I hate these guys. And, and Boba Fett will be like, I hate them too. Also, they hate me. And Han's going to be like, what? Why do they hate you? And he's all, that's a story for another time.
I actually think the Pykes are going to wipe out the Tusken Raiders.
Mm.
And I think that's what's going to put Boba Fett on his journey by himself. And that's how he's going to come across in Mando season 2, besides Fennec Shand. But in season 1, but yeah, I think that's really at the end of the day, what's going to be the consequence, and that's kind of what's going to set Boba Fett on this current path.
Maybe Kyle.
Well, Derrick just stole my thunder, because that was my thinking. Is this goes one of two ways: either the Pykes take out that Tusken Raiders tribe, and that sets Boba on his path to Mandalorian, or the Pykes are become tied in with the Hutts to go up against Boba later on. But I think it makes more sense that the Pykes get revenge on these Tusken Raiders tribe, and which leads Boba to making the decision, no, I'm going to get revenge, and I'm going to do it by gaining power in the criminal underworld. So he takes out Bib, and then that leads us to where we're at now. But I think that makes the most sense. I honestly hope it's not that predictable, but we'll see how that plays out.
But it would make it more of a revenge story, which would be great. That'd be more Boba than him going nice.
I'm going to have to go back and watch Mando season 2 again. I don't remember Boba Fett being all by himself when he first saw Din Djarin. I thought that he was out there. He was out there as a scout, but I thought that when Din and Toro had gone to the not Toro. I thought that when Din was there with the Tuskens talking about the crate dragon, that Boba Fett turned out had been hanging around in his robe.
Boba Fett you see him on the crest of a dune mountain.
Right, but I meant the episode after that one.
Well, it's not 100% clear if Boba Fett is attached to that tribe that took on the crate dragon.
Yeah, they didn't wear any black.
He's, I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Yeah.
We'll have to
Hey, like I
keep
need
watching.
any reason to go back and watch Mando season 2. All right. Well, we got one more question for this episode, then we'll wrap up tonight. This podcast. Nathan, what's your fifth and final question?
The fifth and final question has to do with a deep cut for Star Wars, Cammy and Fixer. We see them somewhere in some watering hole, literally a watering hole, Tatooine. Are we excited for this type of cameo? What does this mean? And is this Tashi Station?
I'm pretty sure it was Tashi Station, and that is and that was in Anchorhead. And yeah, I love that it was Cammy and Fixer. I think it's such a great callback to an almost non-existent, non-canon storyline from A New Hope. For those who don't know, in some deleted scenes that would have taken place at the beginning of Episode 4, Cammy and Fixer, the couple that gets accosted by the biker gang in this episode of the Book of Boba Fett, they were friends of Luke, or as they called him, Wormy, during their childhood, growing up era there on Tatooine.
And Biggs.
And Biggs,
And
Big
Biggs, yeah.
Starklighter hung out with them as well. But those scenes were cut from the original A New Hope, and I think that up until the novelization for The Last Jedi, no one had thought about Cammy in like 30 years. Of course, in the novelization of The Last Jedi, Luke has a dream where he never left Tatooine and he married Cammy and they lived there as moisture farmers. But that's the only part about her that was canon until this episode, because the deleted scenes, of course, are not canon. So it was really funny to see that kind of very deep cut of, super Star Wars fandom. And I thought it was hilarious that Fixer, the ultimate bully back when Luke was a kid, got his comeuppance from being bullied by the biker gang. Derrick?
So 2 things. So if Luke marries Cammy, did he kill Fixer?
No. I don't
think that was mentioned in
Kill.
the novel.
He might have taken a hand. He might have taken a hand.
Yes.
Well, because the question is, would he still have gotten his father's lightsaber from Obi-Wan? Because he technically got that before, they went
Good
to...
question. Good
you know,
question.
that. But the
In
main
this
thing
dream-
is... Oh,
in
go
this
ahead.
dream in The Last Jedi novelization, Luke did meet Obi-Wan, but he chose not to go with him.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. He chose not to go with him, but he still would have gotten his lightsaber, I think, right? Because the
Yeah,
way that goes.
Maybe.
I don't think
But-
that means he suddenly decides to murder one of his friends.
Yeah. Hey, if you really wanted
I mean,
Cammy, right? We could have
call
been
me-
Romeo and Juliet. Could have been,
Call
Luke
me
and
Wormy
Cammy.
for the last time.
He is a Skywalker, so I wouldn't doubt that he would kill the Sand People, the men, the women, the children too, but not his friends.
I don't know.
Fixer's not-
Anakin got pissed at Obi-Wan because he thought Obi-Wan was sleeping with Padme.
Fixer's
Yeah.
not young enough. He's not a youngling.
Okay. But anyways, to clarify, it was Tashi Station in Anchorhead because after he does that with the skiffs, like 2 or I don't know, whatever, a week or 2 later, after they have the montage and they take over the train and the Pykes, he tells them that Anchorhead is there. They should reach it by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anchorhead was close to where they were at.
And it was definitely Cammy and Fixer. I made sure to pause the credits so I could
Oh, yeah,
find
it
their
was.
names. It's definitely Cammy and Fixer.
All right,
great.
Kyle, you can wrap it up for us here. What are your thoughts about the whole Cammy Fixer cameo? Cameo.
This goes back to what I was talking about earlier. The small things. They find these little obscure things, put them in, and they're great for the diehard fans. And it gives something to the new fans something to research and have some fun with. And these are the things I like that Jon Favreau does, and when Dave's involved, he does as well. So yeah, I was fine with it. I think it was fun, and I hope they continue to do things like this because that's what one of the things that makes these shows fun.
Yeah, totally. And we have a lot of fun putting on this show for you guys. So, Derrick, would you please remind the folks out there where they can find the show on the old interwebs?
Yes. So you can start off by going to fpnet.podbean.com, which is the master feed, to download the Podbean app, and then you can search for us there. You can also search for the Fandom Podcast Network on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. Obviously, you can also find us on YouTube, where you'll be able to stream this video later. You can go to Facebook, where you can search for the What a Piece of Junk of Star Wars podcast Facebook group, which I run. You can email whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com, and Scott will get those questions out to us. He also runs the Twitter account @WhatWars, and Kyle and team run the Instagram, which is the Fandom Podcast Network. And what's the one thing we like to talk about, Nathan, about these Apple Podcast reviews?
Well, we love to get Apple Podcast reviews, and we want you to give the review that you feel is appropriate. Let us know how we're doing. If there's things that we can do to improve, please let us know that. But that said, we love 5-star reviews for a couple of reasons. One, it helps other people find this podcast. But two, we don't want to upset the Wookiee. And this week, the Wookiee is BK. We really don't want to upset that Wookiee. So please give us a 5-star review.
Absolutely. But whatever you want to send to us in the way of feedback, we appreciate it. And we want to thank all of you for listening and joining in us with this episode. And please make sure to tell us anything that you think we can do better. And always remember to respect each other and always respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.
Oh.